Hey, it's Amy Brown from the Bobby Bone Show. Join me in supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for a chance to win a trip to meet Megan Maroney at the 2025 iHeart Country Festival in Austin, Texas on May 3rd, hosted by Bobby Bones. We're going to hook you up with tickets, flights, hotel, food credits, and a meet and greet with Megan Maroney. Take action now to support St. Jude and help cure childhood cancer, and you're going to be entered for a chance to win. Visit iHeartCountryTrip.com to learn more.
How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1, go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2, collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3, play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4, unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to Family Law Talk. Family Law Talk. Presented by Kirk Stange of Stange Law Firm, PC. Stange Law Firm is a multi-state family law firm. Now, here's your host, Kirk Stange.
Welcome to Family Law Talk. We have an interesting topic today. The topic is debt in divorce. And this episode today is based on an article on our blog on StangeLawFirm.com dated February 4th, 2025. And the title of that article is your former spouse's debt your responsibility? So as a follow-up to the episode today, go on over to our blog and read this article on the same topic for more information. But let's go ahead and jump into the topic at hand. When parties get married, they can come into it in different financial states, right? Some people come into a marriage with a lot of assets and not a lot of debt. Some people come into a marriage and they've got a lot of debt and they don't have a whole lot of assets. And so when parties decide to get married, then there can be a concern about the debt if one or both parties are bringing debt into the marriage itself. And then on the flip end, at the conclusion of a divorce, there can be a lot of negotiation, a lot of rancor in terms of who's going to take the debt. And is the debt marital debt? Is the debt separate debt? And how does all of this work out? And obviously, when we're talking about debt, there can be all kinds of debt that individuals have coming into a marriage or leaving a marriage, from credit card debt, student loan debt, could be medical debt. It could be simply the mortgage to the house. It could be notes for vehicles that the parties own. And there could be lots of other debt that individuals have as well, from personal loans to business loans, you name it. There are a lot of possibilities in terms of debt. And this debt issue can be a big, big issue. Lots of individuals are just worried about, what assets they're going to get. But the question about debt can be a big, big deal that lots of individuals want to know a whole lot about when they're contemplating getting married or getting divorced, okay? So there are some situations where debt is typically going to be marital debt, okay? So joint debts, if you will. And typically what we're talking about here is any debt that was accrued during the marriage itself. And what a lot of parties miss is they think that the name on the debt itself is dispositive. So if husband has a credit card in his name or wife has a credit card in her name, then they oftentimes think, well, I'm not responsible for that debt. That debt is in their name. But if two individuals are married at the time that this debt is accrued, then it is technically marital debt. And the same rules apply to assets. So any assets individuals get during marriage is going to be marital property in an equitable division state, right? So again, the assets could be in the name of husband, it could be in the name of wife. So husband could buy a car, wife could buy a car and not put the other spouse's name on it. But if it's acquired during marriage, it is still a marital asset. Likewise, any debts acquired during the marriage are going to be marital debts. Now, debts that individual brings into the marriage, so if they had it before the marriage itself, then that would be separate debt. And from a technical legal standpoint, that should be debt that they take with them in the instance of the divorce if they brought that debt into the marriage. But obviously tracing that debt and figuring out when it was accrued can be a big, big issue. So yeah, you're getting married and maybe you're marrying somebody theoretically who's not good with money, and they run up a whole lot of debt, that can be a big problem for the other spouse. I mean, even if the other spouse isn't somebody who runs up a lot of debt, who isn't a big spender, if their spouse is, that can create a big problem in the instance that a divorce later takes place. And it's definitely something somebody has to think long and hard about. Now, one of the other questions that can come in the context of divorce is, well, what occurs in an instance where one party's engaging in wasteful dissipation, or they're just spending in a way that is just really irresponsible, and they're running up a bunch of debt? Maybe the other spouse doesn't know anything about it. They didn't endorse this. The other spouse, maybe they have a gambling problem. Maybe they have a drinking problem. Maybe they just have a problem in general with spending, and they spend lots of money. And so the other spouse is often asking if anything can be done in these kinds of instances. And the answer to that question is maybe. It is possible in a divorce to argue that the other party is engaging in wasteful behavior, wasteful dissipation. And so it is possible to ask for that spouse to be responsible for that debt if the other spouse had nothing to do with it. But from a technical standpoint, it's still marital debt. It's still a debt that was accrued during the marriage, so the court has to resolve that issue, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the court is going to divide that debt in half and give each spouse half. It's possible that one spouse could argue that this was wasteful, this was their own behavior, try to argue that they should take on that debt, but it's not an absolute. Courts don't always do that. And so it is a reality that when two individuals get married, they become one person under the eyes of the law. So if one party is running up a bunch of debt, it could be a problem for the other spouse. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into some other questions that individuals have when we get into the topic of divorce. And one of the big ones is this, which is, are you responsible for your partner's debt after a divorce? So once you get divorced, do you have any responsibility for the debt that they accrue? And the technical answer to that is normally no. In a divorce, the court's going to divide the marital property and the debt. And this could be by agreement in a settled case, or it could be that the judge does it after a trial. And so from a technical standpoint, the debt that somebody accrues after a divorce, at that point, the marriage is dissolved and they shouldn't be held responsible for it. But there are some quirks and there are some things parties need to be very careful about. I mean, one of the big ones I've seen is in the instance where the parties owned a home and they had a mortgage and both their names are on the mortgage. And then one of the spouses is going to keep the home, the other spouse is going to move out. And I've seen this scenario numerous times where then, parties do the divorce, maybe pro se by themselves. They don't hire lawyers. And so then there's no clause in the divorce settlement requiring the party keeping the house to refinance it, to remove the other spouse's name off the house. And then years later, let's say the spouse keeping the house stops paying the mortgage, and then there's a foreclosure action. Well, look, if the other spouse's name, who's not keeping the home, isn't removed off the mortgage, they're still on the hook. The mortgage company isn't going to care that the parties are divorced and that the one spouse is keeping the home. If both parties' name is on the mortgage company is going to go after both the parties. Okay, so what's really important is that if there's debt at the time of the divorce and one spouse has taken it, that the other party's name is removed from it, and that there's some clause in the divorce judgment requiring that take place. Otherwise, a party could be in trouble down the line and their credit could be impacted. And this can be a big, big issue. It's a big reason to hire a lawyer when you're going through a divorce, even if you think it's going to be an easy and a settled case. All right, let's go through some other questions. What debts are considered marital debts? Again, in an equitable division state, any debts acquired during the marriage are going to be marital debts, and that would include just about anything. I mean, it could be credit card debt, could be student loan debt, could be that one party bought a vehicle, could be that one party took a personal loan. If parties are married and that debt is accrued during marriage, then it's marital debt. And the only real exception to that would be in a situation where there's a postnuptial agreement that the parties had and they agreed in writing that, these are your debts, these are my debts, and there isn't going to be a blending of these debts. But in the absence of that, any debt accrued during marriage is going to be marital debt. All right. So the next question a lot of individuals have is asset and debt division always equal? So do courts in an equitable division state always divide this in half? And the answer to that question is not necessarily. In an equitable division state, okay, courts divide marital property and marital debt in a just manner when considering certain factors, okay? In each state, it has a statute that's going to deal with property and debt division, and courts can look at all kinds of things, including the length of the marriage, each spouse's earning capacity, it could be tax consequences, it could be other factors. In some states, it could be marital misconduct. In other states, that's not allowed. Okay, so look, dividing property and debt isn't just a straight 50-50. It's not a deal where it's like a butcher just chopping it in half and each party gets half. And this is something a lot of individuals miss. They think that everything is always going to be divided 50-50, and that's not necessarily the case, which is why parties should have a lawyer. I think most judges would start kind of with the idea that 50-50 is a good general presumption, but doesn't mean that's where the court's going to end up. In some cases, it could be 55-45, it could be 60-40, it could be 70-30. Obviously, courts got to rely on factors to do an unequal division, but it's not necessarily just a 50-50 kind of division of marital property and debt. All right, another question individuals have is what's the difference between marital and separate property? Again, separate property, separate debt is something somebody had before the marriage, right? So they accrued it before the marriage, and then there's other possibilities too, like they inherited some property, it was gifted to them, let's say, or it was delineated by a prenuptial agreement, postnuptial agreement, that kind of thing. But otherwise, all property and debt in an equitable distribution state is going to be presumed marital. Okay, and so that is very, very important for individuals to understand and to keep in mind. All right, so again, trying to give you a summation of how debt works. Again, debt that parties bring into the marriage is typically their own. Debt accrued during marriage is typically going to be marital debt. It doesn't matter, whose name is on that debt. Ways around that would be a prenuptial or a postnuptial agreement, something like that. But in a general sense, debt accrued during marriage is going to be marital. And it's important if you're going to be getting divorced and there's a lot of debt, that there's a lot of clarity in the divorce judgment indicating who's taking what debt. And again, if the debt is in both parties' name and one party's going to take it, it's almost always vital to have the other party's name removed from the debt. Okay, and that could be through a refinance. That could be through an assumption agreement, which is something I've seen in the past. And there's potential other possibilities as well. But one thing parties definitely don't want is if they're not going to be responsible for the debt, almost always they're not going to want their name remaining on that debt, because if the other spouse doesn't pay, then the divorce judgment isn't going to prevent the creditor from coming after them as well. All right, so definitely an interesting topic, one I wanted to cover here today. As a follow-up to the episode, go on over to our blog on StangeLawFirm.com, read the article titled, Is Your Former Spouse's Debt Your Responsibility? The date of the article is February 4th, 2025. This will give you more information, but thanks for tuning in today. Stay tuned to our next episode of Family Law Talk coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Family Law Talk with Kirk Stange. Visit StangeLawFirm.com for more about today's topic or to put Stange Law Firm to work for your family today. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri or Illinois reviews or approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The information you obtained in this podcast is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. You should consult an attorney for advice regarding your individual situation. We invite you to contact us and welcome your calls, letters, and electronic mail. Contacting us does not create an attorney-client relationship. Please do not send any confidential information to us until such time as an attorney-client relationship has been established. Past results afford no guarantee of future results, and every case is different and must be judged on its own merits. Kirk Stange is responsible for the content. Headquarters, Office, 120 South Central Avenue, Suite 450, Clayton, Missouri, 63105. Kirk Stange is licensed in Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas.
Hey, it's Amy Brown from the Bobby Bones Show. Join me in supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for a chance to win a trip to meet Megan Maroney at the 2025 iHeart Country Festival in Austin, Texas on May 3rd, hosted by Bobby Bones. We're going to hook you up with tickets, flights, hotel, food credits, and a meet and greet with Megan Maroney. Take action now to support St. Jude and help cure childhood cancer, and you're going to be entered for a chance to win. Visit iHeartCountryTrip.com to learn more.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.